Hey, greetings, everybody. I see Brandon read the description. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the Falcons in a little bit. I'm going to say the Falcons are not morons on one condition and one condition alone. If it still doesn't excuse them all that much, I think you'll appreciate where I'm going with this. And a lot of that, I'll actually credit a lot of you guys for kind of getting me to soften or at least play devil's advocate with the Falcons. But I do want to start out partly just because I put it on the thumbnail and YouTube hates it if you don't use an image from the thumbnail in the video. CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons. I know a lot of you have seen this already. Many of you have seen it like 10 times. I can't get enough of it. CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons battling each other, usually with CJ Stroud getting the better of Micah Parsons, is become one of my favorite sitcoms. It's one of the best sitcoms in existence. I don't know if you saw Jerry Seinfeld the other day said that sitcoms are dead, and TV comedy is dead because of political correctness. But I've got thoughts on that. But anyway, hey, look at that. Overhaul is here. Thanks, Overhaul. What's up, Colby? Hello to J-Rock. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. CJ Stroud and Micah Hyde. Oh, I got to pull up the file first. Just a minute. Here we go.
AFC North on the best division in football, the best conference. So,
and maybe some would argue that's the NFC East.
Is that y'all?
So that already, that's the best. That's the best image. I've used that look 18 times now.
I mean, it's only y'all and the Eagles.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, on paper, last year we were argued the best division of football.
No. All right, this is important. A lot of you have seen this already, so I'm not going to run it straight through. Micah starts off saying, last year on paper, the NFC South was the best division, or NFC East was the best division in football. So he says nothing about preseason.
No, sir. Yeah. Let us get to your Dallas Cowboys.
Everyone was a playoff team. The Giants were a playoff team.
What?
I'm not the Giants.
The
Giants were
2 years ago.
2 years ago. 2 years ago.
What is he talking about? He don't know.
We were arguing going into last year. It was argued
North
that we was the best. Everyone was
football.
AFC North.
Washington was argued that
he's talking, bro.
You see Micah's looking to the host for help, and he's getting none.
Washington wasn't nothing, bro. What are you talking about?
That meant the Giants.
Giants team?
It was like Washington was good. Oh, I meant the Giants. Another horrible example.
What are you talking
about? What do you mean? They lost to the Eagles.
In a game?
That's 2 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm saying going into it.
Fam, you don't know what you're talking about.
Going into last year, the
no
NFC
one
North
in the
was
planet except for Micah Parsons thought the NFC East was better than the AFC North. No one in the planet.
You can't argue that.
I can, bro, unless you're delusional.
How am I delusional?
Going into last year,
the North was
going into last year.
So
we have better teams
before,
right
maybe
now.
2 years
going into last year.
Going into last year.
Yeah.
So you're saying
you thought Washington was
going
going to be good.
Year.
There's not a weak team in the AFC North. What are you talking about?
What do you mean?
Baltimore, Cincinnati,
on
Cleveland,
paper, Washington was supposed to be a really great team.
Bad. No,
on paper,
not better. No one. Washington
Washington
is not better than any one of those 4 teams. I guarantee you.
Yeah,
that's why
the Giants.
That's why Daniel Jones got the contract. They went to a playoff game.
I don't.
Okay. Now, yeah, you can have a whole debate about why Daniel Jones got the contract, but yeah.
Brian DeBoer's first year.
And
then they added Darren Waller. Then they added Darren Waller.
The Ravens, the Browns.
Then they added Darren Waller. They added Jalen Hyatt.
Hold on.
Into that season, they had the Giants.
No sense,
we were ranked 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC.
You guys always are.
So then he takes it to just the Cowboys themselves. I'm gonna look. I haven't looked into this yet. After we watch this little video, I'm gonna look at the preseason Super Bowl odds from 2023 just to fact check. Since Micah shifted it over to on paper going into the season, who was the best division? We'll have to take a look at that.
Eagles, Cowboys, everyone knew, but like the Giants, everyone thought they overachieved the year before. Everyone's like they're gonna take a step back.
Thank you.
I thought
we were ranked 3rd going into preseason.
You guys,
Cowboys, yeah.
That's not the
hold on.
You're trying to make it.
So all this is great.
No,
and I love you guys.
They're awesome, man. Okay, I want to look at this. I want to look at the preseason Super Bowl odds from 2023. So let's fact check this. Since he moved the goalposts, but let's see. Let me be sure this is up there. Okay. Let's see. Washington Commanders dead last. New York Giants, bottom quartile. And let's see, am I skipping over? Where's what did I say? Washington Commanders. Did I skip over somebody? Oh, Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about, man. So that was just for the preseason at least. So there's Micah's got to back off on some of this stuff, on some of this sometimes. Let me get back to here.
His
No,
hands
this is them just being juvenile and goofy.
are
Does not wear
enormous.
gloves.
Not only large, but also like just thick. This guy was 342 pounds and probably couldn't get under 300 if he wanted to. And his ability to hold up against the bull rush, second to none in this draft class. No one was going through him. If I can keep making some.
Yeah.
But he.
So, just trade for Micah already. Oh, yeah. I don't know if DeMeco starts playing GM. I get if the Texans win a Super Bowl, I think I'd totally be cool with DeMeco with CJ playing GM. I'd be fine with that already. Funniest part for me was when CJ was describing how good MHJ was, and he said a few questionable things. That was a pause moment. Yeah. Also, the other night, I don't have the video here, but they were at the Sixers game, and and Micah apparently, CJ said that Micah told Allen Iverson that he could beat him one-on-one, and he had a better crossover or something like that. So I do think one of you said that Micah was just trolling a lot of times. I think Micah's got some troll in him. I think that, and the mic'd up, this is a good point. When they play this year, if those two are mic'd up, that might end up being gold. Okay, I wanted to warm up with some of the fun stuff. Micah's probably going to get annoyed with the Cowboys during the deal process, pull a Saquon and go to the Eagles. Ooh. I didn't, so I just wanted to warm up a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of some DeMeco and Caserio presser. Then I asked for people to soften my stance, tell me things to soften my stance on the Falcons picking Michael Penix. I have softened my stance, but only on one condition. And a lot of it's based on the Falcons just lying about why they actually drafted Michael Penix. They have to. If they're not lying about why they drafted Michael Penix, then they are the dumbest organization in football. So I think they're lying to save Kirk Cousins' feelings, but we'll get to that. Got the Falcons fan reaction. I'm going to do Rick Spielman, the former NFL GM, his AFC South draft grades. If we get to this, to all this, DeMeco on Kamari Lassiter, and then there's a scouting report on Kamari Lassiter that I liked that I found from before the draft. I want to watch that with you. Mel Kiper on the Texans draft, DeMeco on Solomon Byrd, and then I've got some plays that I want to break down from Solomon Byrd, the 7th round defensive end out of USC. So DeMeco on Calen Bullock, just to roll into some Texans stuff because I didn't really get a chance to respond thoughtfully to a couple of these clips from the press conference the other day.
With starting with Bullock, right, you see just his ball skills, his range, back there in the deep half of the field, it's just stood out. Right? He's an exceptional playmaker, attack the ball. It's what we are about on defense, attacking the ball, and that's what Bullock does. That's what we're looking for him to do for us.
Yeah, and I think that I like hearing that from DeMeco, just a very clear plan for what they want for him, because that was what Calen Bullock is good at. It makes it interesting with the three main guys at safety right now. Between Jimmy Ward, you got questions about his durability. I mean, he's 1 year older and he's been injured a lot in the last couple of years. He loves to play with a swarm mentality. He is one of the inventors of the hip drop tackle. So between the physicality, the banning of one of his signature tackles from a couple of years back, and his age, I'm nervous about his durability. So it becomes Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward, Calen Bullock. I'll be really surprised if Calen Bullock doesn't play a good amount this year. But I think that what it does open the door for, and it is intriguing, is it makes more of a clear, okay, there's a deep safety, there's a box safety at times, and depending on where they want to go with that, compared to some teams where if you want to play a bunch of quarters coverage or where you've got two safeties that are basically just interchangeable, I don't think it's going to be that way. Calen Bullock can just focus on being a deep safety. That's not Jalen Petrie's favorite form of football. You can come up and do some of the things that Jalen Petrie really did in college, right? And play in the box, be the slot corner at times, just a lot more versatility. And when those three guys are healthy, I do think it allows you to be a little bit more creative defensively. So I'm feeling good about Calen Bullock. The biggest thing about him that you hear from everybody is that, I mean, people were very, very happy. Like I've canvassed all these different draft experts, and Calen Bullock was one of the more universally well-regarded draft picks by the Texans, and there were a lot of teams that were interested in Calen Bullock at that point in the draft. He's just got to get some physical maturity on him, and I think because he's plenty willing to be physical, and over time, maybe when he adds some strength, as Caserio said he needed to do, maybe then he can become a guy that can play up in the box, play back. But I think for now, he's going to be that deep center fielder. The other pick that people seem to be really pleased with the Texans about was Cade Stover, the tight end out of Ohio State. I'm sure CJ was very, very happy about that.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's elite.
So he's talking about Cade Stover.
I mean, this guy is as tough and hard-nosed a player that they had in the program. Just kind of going back to the question and DeMeco's answer about developing players, I'd say Cade's a good example of a player who's only played tight end for 2 years, so he's certainly not a finished product, but he has the mindset and the work ethic to improve. I mean, how he was raised. I mean, this guy is everything you want in a football player and then more. I mean, he probably played hurt this year. I mean, I think he had an MCL or had an issue where, quite frankly, it would have limited some other players, but he just braced it up and he just kept playing football. So, I mean, I don't want to speak for DeMeco, but I think we feel the same way. This is probably one of our favorite, football players in the entire draft, regardless of position, because of his mentality, because of his mindset. And he still is developing as a player. I mean, 2 years ago, he was playing defensive end in the Rose Bowl against Utah. Now he's, played tight end for 2 years, and here he is getting picked in the bottom of the 4th round, and his position is, we think tight end. That's why we drafted him. So, but, I mean, blue collar as they come, and from a makeup, traits, toughness, mentality, I mean, this is an elite guy.
Yeah, he feels pretty good about it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when Nick is with DeMeco, his answers are a lot shorter. I've noticed this too. Like when Sean and I interview him in person, his answers are a lot shorter because he gets the verbal cues and everything. I think when he's solo, I think he grew up listening to Jim Rome. I think he goes into solo radio host mode, or like when he's on the phone with us, you can't see who you're talking to or anything, but lot more concise there. But that was maybe the longest he talked about an individual player in that press conference with DeMeco. A lot of people really like Cade Stover. I was kind of surprised that there seemed like a sizable portion of the fan base that wasn't happy with that pick. And I understand maybe some of that is just because you wanted other positions. So I think the biggest thing about him, aside from just only having played tight end for 2 years, was his willingness to play injured, which that's hard to judge sometimes. Some guys are just healthy, so they don't have the opportunity to play injured. But the fact that he grew up on a farm, which there's just fewer of those guys than there used to be, and football people love farm kids because farm kids tend to be pretty tough kids. I'm really, really happy with that one. And I do think that he shows when I went back and I watched his blocking, because that's one of the question marks, he's only been playing tight end for 2 years, but I found a lot of examples of him when he was blocking correctly, blocking with really good form. And you can tell he's really trying to do it right. And in some respects might end up perhaps being better at it because he doesn't have any bad habits to unlearn as long as he keeps working at it. So the more I learn about Cade, the more excited I get about that. And take a couple comments before we get to the Falcons stuff, because I know some of you are going to think I'm a freaking moron for softening my stance, and I get that. This is a moron business, and I'm willing to be one every now and then. A lot of it depends on what's going to happen in the future, obviously. I heard at least one team was mad about the Texans jumping up for Calen because they wanted him at corner. Is that okay? I have to look at that, Ethan Matz. I haven't heard the part about teams wanting him at corner. Where does Jimmy fit in? I think so. Jimmy, again, because of his age and injury history, I think maybe this helps load manage him a little bit, if that's a thing in football for safeties. B, he can play slot corner. He didn't want to when he was in San Francisco, partly because they kind of sprung it on him. He'd been injured. The whole story behind Jimmy Ward not wanting to play slot corner, it's not 100% that he didn't ever want to play it. It's that he was injured, came back, and Shanahan wanted him to play slot corner that week. I believe it was the Chiefs. So versus that receiving core a couple of years ago, including some Tyreek Hill action, and he had to cover. He had a rough game. He had a really rough game when he first came back, and that was part of it. So it wasn't it wasn't even as much not playing slot, but it was having it sprung on him. Country strong is a thing. Herschel Walker, Seth Payne, hay-bale tossers back in the day. That's me and Herschel Walker. We get a lot of comparisons there. It's common. I don't get tired of it. It's better than Ed Helms. Nobody didn't want to trade with Nick C. They weren't going to help us get better. Saints traded up and stole Kool-Aid from the Texans. Yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry and Cooper DeJean. That's the big question. Is at the very least, those teams suspected that the Texans wanted a cornerback. The Eagles got Cooper DeJean, so they correctly assumed that both the Saints, I can't remember if the Saints traded up first or second, whatever. The Saints left up 2 above the Texans. Then the Saints, Eagles left up 2 above the Texans. Then the Saints jumped above the Texans, both to take cornerbacks. So as far as that goes, Marcel, oh, yeah, that was there. I didn't put the comment up there. Whatever it was. Lance mentioned the thing about Calen on it. Oh, about the cornerback. Okay, gotcha. Wonder how quickly they're going to be memory holing all this Penix criticism when he ends up being better than Caleb Williams this year. I don't know if you're a Falcons fan, but I admire your confidence in the projection. I'm a little bit more nuanced on it. So let's dive in to the fun and hilarity that is everything going on with Michael Penix. I typed penis 3 times today. Twice related to this, once something completely different. Here we go.
The Atlanta Falcons select Michael Penix Jr., quarterback from Washington.
What? No! What? What in the world? No! What? What? Michael Penix? Michael Penix? Are you serious? We should get Cousins? We just got Kirk Cousins? What? Oh, so I guess we ain't going after the quarterback.
What is that guy's name? Oh, I forgot to link it below. That was the best video I found. That was not the official NFL broadcast. That wasn't on there. But look at this, by the way, real quick. I'm sorry if that blew your ears out. Okay. It's good. Look at this. Look at this draft party. That's pretty cool. I like doing it in the stadium like that. And I don't know if that blew your guys' ears out like it did me. But
we want to just get another quarterback. That's what we're doing. What? What? So we ain't going after the quarterback now. We just gonna get as many quarterbacks as you can get. That's what we doing.
Yeah.
That's what we doing.
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah. He's a hardcore Falcons fan, obviously. He has a YouTube channel. I'll link it below after. I promise. I've gotten a lot better at that. I'm actually linking these things when I say I'm going to link them. Diana Russinni was on the Athletic Football Podcast talking with Robert Mays and somebody else. And she shed some light on, and honestly, I think Diana Russinni gets a lot of good stuff, but some of what she's reporting here is what the Falcons told her. And I don't think the Falcons are telling the complete entire truth about why they took Penix. And I've got Bill Belichick, I've got Dan Orlovsky, all of the arguments in favor of Michael Penix that don't involve the Falcons being concerned about Kirk Cousins' health don't make any sense to me at all. Like, not one tiny bit. So we'll go through them a little bit. But there is an argument, and it's just that I suspect that the Falcons, just as they should be, are probably not so certain about Kirk Cousins' ability to play or at least stay healthy after an Achilles tendon tear at the age of 36, and which puts it back on them for signing Kirk Cousins in the first place. But that's the only thing that really makes sense. But we'll go through and see how all this happened. And then there's yet another reason, aside from like any football reason, there's a cultural reason that the Falcons really seem to have botched this in some ways. So this is Diana Russinni on why the Falcons picked Michael Penix.
So the way they see it, it's actually very simple through their prism. It's, we think we're going to be a really good team for the next 2 years under Kirk Cousins, and our opportunity and chances of getting a good quarterback at the top of a draft probably won't be there for us. We'll be picking late. So we like this guy. We think he's worth picking him with the top 10 pick, and we're just going to go after him. Was it the plan the entire time headed into the draft? I was told no. They were going defense. In fact, there was a time where they were considering even moving up. There was a time yesterday afternoon, the Rams were calling them. Remember, we had that conversation yesterday that they were in very serious talks about trading with the Rams.
Okay, so that, like, this is the part that doesn't make sense to me. And I know that that was the standard line, was that they're going to be so good that we're not going to have a chance to draft another quarterback. Like, all right. So you might be forced to Kirk. Okay. All right. I don't know how long your stretch of awesomeness was going to be or what have you, but that stretch of awesomeness would have been accomplished with a quarterback that you didn't draft with a number 8 overall pick. You went out and got him. So I don't like there have been so many different ways to get quarterbacks, whether it's Tom Brady or Matt Stafford or whomever else, to win a Super Bowl in recent years, not to mention not picking all that high, or you could trade up to number 11 and get a bum like Pat Mahomes or something. Like, that part, I don't understand that and get it. It doesn't make any sense at all. And people are reciting it, I think, because they want to believe it or something. That doesn't make any sense at all. Not to mention just the whole plan, like hurting your chance of competing in the short term to plan for the long term is like, it's like, what is it like? It's like cash advancing yourself, cash advancing on your credit card to put money into your retirement plan. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're actually hurting your chance of making more money to put into your retirement plan later. So that part, I just don't get it. This is the cultural part in terms of how you treat your players. This is where it gets really weird.
You know, when Kirk Cousins met with the Falcons formally, they let him know, hey, we're going to probably draft your successor coming up here in the draft in a few weeks. And, you know, later round, most likely, that's how it's going to go. So the plan was never to go, or at least they didn't inform him that they were going to go for his successor with their top pick.
Right. Okay. So they told him, but they didn't tell him. And it wasn't their plan to begin with. I like this. If that's true, you just brought this guy into the organization, and you're, at least according to the way Diana Russinni is reporting it, you're not even being upfront with the guy about exactly how you're going to go about it or what he should prepare himself for. Look, Kirk Cousins himself was drafted in the same draft as RG3. Like, he knows the deal, and he was probably they probably came full circle on that, and he got it. But it's a lot different going in the third round than number 8 overall. So as you can see, I've softened it, but it's only based on the fact that I think the Falcons, they've got to be lying, and they just don't feel that good about Kirk Cousins' health after having had him in and taking a look at him, or just starting to realize, like, oh, okay, wow, this is a Achilles tendon on a 36-year-old is kind of a big deal.
The second that pick came out, I immediately reached out to Cousins' agent to just try to get a feel for how he was, you know, kind of comprehending all of it at the moment, because I think we were stunned. So I thought maybe he knew about it, and he didn't. They called him exactly when they were on the clock. They let him know. He was on his way going to some event for the Falcons, actually.
Okay. I gotta address this real quick. Where is it? Well, there's this. I saw a left-handed quarterback. Yeah, I know there's some good memes about the tasteless memes. I do not approve. Everyone dropped further than expected. You can't possibly be talking about Michael Penix. So I think that's got to be another conversation. That was what I saw. I refuse to believe you're talking about Michael Penix.
They're not happy. They're really.
So she's talking about Kirk Cousins' reps or people.
Really upset, actually, about this. And it's continuing today.
Let's see. So the next one is this is Diana Russinni talking about Kirk Cousins and his perception of the situation.
He went to Atlanta with this idea that they're going to go and try to win a Super Bowl, and to use a pick on a quarterback that isn't even going to or isn't most likely to step in there for another few seasons. It just doesn't make them better today.
Right. Which I agree. It doesn't make him better today. Dan Orlovsky gets into this a little bit later, and I vehemently disagree with him on his point in defense of this pick. I think that the only thing that really makes sense is that they just don't feel good about Kirk Cousins. The whole part about the age stuff confuses me too. Okay, Kirk Cousins is 36 years old. You just gave him really a 2-year contract with the $100 million guaranteed over the course of 2 years. That's all well and good, but there's other ways to get quarterbacks. In defense of the Falcons, some people have questioned drafting a guy as old as Michael Penix when you're going to plan on having him sit and wait. I'd say, look, if he works out as a quarterback and then he can play until he's 35 or later, these days that's not as big a deal. So I don't worry about that. The individual selection of Michael Penix and the fact that he's had 2 ACLs on the same knee and all these other issues, that's pause and reason for concern as well. But then there's also just the simple matter of you're playing the parlay game here. If your plan is like, well, we have to spend a number 8 overall right now on a quarterback because we're going to be so awesome. We're going to be so awesome that we can't get it. How are we going to get a quarterback in 2 years? Even though you got awesome with Kirk Cousins, a quarterback that you didn't draft number 8 off. All right, great. So we're playing the parlay game now. We got so awesome and we're no way to trade up into a quarterback. And, oh, by the way, Michael Penix has to still work out. In this little scenario you have in your mind, the majority of quarterbacks who have been drafted in the first round, or especially in the top 10 in the last several years, don't even last 4 years on the first team they're on. So you're playing that parlay game then too. You've got that. There's no way in hell. There's no way. I cannot talk my way into this.
Seems like they're throwing a wrench in those successful 2 seasons that they're about to have.
Yes, you're throwing a wrench into the successful 2 seasons you're about to have.
Yeah, I think it's just that. They obviously
who's this schmuck?
Like the kid. I think this is an example where you probably could have traded back to take Penix. Maybe they thought that Denver or somebody else was going to slide in there. I don't know, but this seems a little high for him. But there's a lot to like about Penix. There's a lot to like about this kid. He's very mature. They talk about the injuries, but he's been healthy the last 2 years, and he's won a lot of games, on a good football team at Washington. So, it's an interesting pick, and it's interesting. Look, having 2 good quarterbacks isn't a bad thing.
Now, have you ever seen anything like this, though?
Okay, before he goes into whether he's seen anything like this. Never. Okay, I'm glad. Bill Belichick always calms me down. I've never gotten angry about Bill Belichick about anything. But the part about Michael Penix, the quarterback, and not to mention like his athleticism, his ability to throw on the run, play from the pocket, do all those things. There's a lot to like about Michael Penix. And the reason I mention his ability to throw on the run is because rookie quarterbacks, if pressed into action, generally when they're not CJ Stroud, the athleticism helps a lot. The athleticism is a big deal, and it gets you over the hump as you're trying to learn the position, which again goes back to, I think that they probably feel good about Michael Penix's age and maturity, his athleticism, his ability to step in and do all the things and run the same offense as Kirk Cousins. If Kirk Cousins' Achilles snaps like a twig somewhere during the season, I don't want that to happen. I like Kirk Cousins well enough, but this is the other part, the example of when this has happened before.
Pay a quarterback and you draft one in the top 10.
A lot of money.
I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers, and he took Love in the top. Well, not in the top 10. I think he was like 20, but yeah. Hey, that's why there's 32 different teams. They all have their own boards. They have their own philosophies. They all have their own logos.
Right. Jordan. I guess Jordan Love, if that's your example, like it's the worst example to use because where did they get? They got Jordan Love in the 20s, and because that was a team that wasn't able to get up and draft number 8 overall, right? Like they're never going to get up to that. Plus, the notion that a team that's in the mid rounds or late rounds can't get up to number 8 overall just by a trade or whatever is absurd. So that part, none of it makes any sense. The Green Bay example doesn't make any sense because they got their next quarterback later in the draft because they were a good team. Not to mention, did they win a Super Bowl? Were they an awesome team by having both a high-paid quarterback and Jordan Love on the team at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. Like this, the Packers is the worst example to use because the Packers' very issue was that they wouldn't draft offensive weapons to help out Aaron Rodgers, or at least as one of their issues. Aaron Rodgers, just whatever. So that's specifically the argument against doing something like this. Remember, I'm arguing that it was okay that the Falcons drafted Michael Penix. It's these arguments for it that are driving me insane. TJ Yates, quarterback coach for the Atlanta Falcons, Bengals killer. Not that helps in the NFC.
That he did in that Texas game, was really the game that kind of solidified it for me that this guy is a real dude that has got a shot to be, a very good pro. Can make every throw on the field, can touch every part of the field with his arm, and he does it all by not taking any sacks. His self-belief that he has about his ability to play and play at the next level, and just being around the guy, the sense of calm, the confidence, everything he kind of exudes, you naturally gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I just wanted to show TJ Yates there. I know I've got Falcons and Jaguars fans and otherwise in here, but this is I used to play for the Texans. I know I played for the Jaguars too, but I'm in Houston. I do the Houston Texans now. And you can't have me back, no matter how much you beg, damn it. Somebody pointed out here, I don't know if you're correcting me or not. Yeah, it's a 4-year contract, but as far as the 2 years of guarantees is what I'm pointing out. It's easier to step away after 2 years. I didn't mean to say that it was just a 2-year contract. And if Kirk Cousins is playing as fabulously as they project, that's the other thing that drives me insane. Okay, if it works out really well with Kirk Cousins, then it's working out for another 4 years or so, at which point you've just held on to what is now like an aging Methuselah of a backup quarterback. And I know I just made the argument that it's okay because he can play a long time. But if it works out as well as you think it is, it's not going to be just 2 years and then time to move on, unless you're, maybe the Kansas City Chiefs with Alex Smith. People bring up that example. Right. They had Alex Smith. They were a good quality team, and they still drafted Pat Mahomes. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I came into this podcast trying like hell to see Atlanta's side of it. And the only thing that makes sense is if Kirk Cousins is just not recovering as well, or they kind of got a speaking to from somebody like maybe Arthur Blank. Honestly, maybe Arthur Blank said, look, we're in uncharted territory here. We got a 36-year-old quarterback with an Achilles tendon. Well, we don't get to wait around a year and find out if Aaron Rodgers can pull it off or not. So let's just go ahead and have him. So that's the thing that makes sense. It's that if it's concerns or anything else, and the fact that they didn't tell Kirk Cousins about it leads me to believe that it's more just concerns about the uncertainty of the situation more so than it is like anything that was a setback or anything like that. And then Rick Neuheisel, I don't know why I've got Rick Neuheisel on here. I had the clip and I forgot to take it out. Here's Rick Neuheisel.
Yeah, I think you had to give either another weapon to Kirk Cousins. Rome Odunze was there, right? That's why would have been my pick. Rome Odunze.
I'd like Rome Odunze. I'd like a defensive end. I'd like anybody that might help you win. But this is the lowest form of sports argument right here. Don't ever catch yourself using this argument, because it's like as soon as you utter it, you've countered yourself with your own argument.
Dallas Turner or a lot too. Do we believe that one player was going to be the difference between them beating those teams and getting to the Super Bowl this year? No.
Right. Okay. The old, draft picks don't actually matter that much because that one guy isn't going to do anything unless he's a quarterback, I suppose. No, but I'll tell you what, you know who wouldn't have won at least one of their Super Bowls if they didn't have Chris Jones, a defensive tackle? The Chiefs. I think Chris Jones has made so many clutch plays in big moments. But to get a Chris Jones, you got to draft 2 or 3 dudes. That's the way the draft works. It's never one individual player. This is like asking which dollar made you rich, right? At what point, or which $10,000 made you rich? At what point do you just start saying, well, it's not worth actually trying to get better or get richer or anything. So it's a bogus argument. Orlovsky let me down in even uttering that. The other one that drives me crazy is when, in various little things they've done to tweak baseball. It's fine if you don't like a rule change, but it's never when you say, this is going to save baseball. Oh, this one thing is going to save baseball. No, it's 15 or 20 moves that they've made to save baseball.
Draft picks, guys who have been, or 5 drafts, the guys that have been at defensive end drafted in the first round, you got 5 hits and 5 misses.
Right. And it's worse for quarterbacks. It's way worse for quarterbacks. We just spent in Houston several years, and then the last couple years with Bill O'Brien, where they were playing the parlay game. Whereas like, well, if this works out, and if this works out, and if we get bad value, if we overpay here and we don't get enough back on this trade here, if it all works out, then it'll be awesome, right? Like, no, it's 2-14. Never play the parlay game.
It's not a sure thing either.
No, none of it is. All right. So that's where I am. I am okay with the Falcons picking Michael Penix if what they genuinely were was concerned about whether or not Kirk Cousins is actually going to make it or not. None of the other arguments, and I think I've seen them all, really make sense to me. I understand the value of quarterbacks. I understand Bill Belichick saying it's always good to have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. The Patriots were not drafting quarterbacks number 8 overall when they had Tom Brady, even his aging years. Not that, they obviously, anyway. I think they've got to be concerned about Kirk Cousins. So on the basis of me thinking that the Falcons are definitely lying about why they drafted Michael Penix, I'm cool with them drafting Michael Penix if it is indeed that they're just concerned about Kirk Cousins' ability to play with his Achilles tendon. Now, that makes them idiots for thinking Kirk Cousins should get all that guaranteed money, I think. No, I think Arthur Blank, I won't say that. I don't think they're idiots for that. I think Arthur Blank might also be in just YOLO mode because he's in his 80s and he wants to get this done. And he's willing to spend that money, and it won't hamstring against the cap later on. So that part of it too is I keep seeing people argue that, man, why would you do this now when Arthur Blank is old and wants to win a Super Bowl now? I think part of it is that he's willing to pay for a quarterback, but also have the insurance policy of Michael Penix in case it doesn't work out with Kirk Cousins. And obviously you can't go out and buy another high-priced veteran to go along with Kirk Cousins. I've softened, despite me erupting 7 times in anger during that little ordeal. I still am more okay with it today than I was on Friday when I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. Rick Spielman. All right, let me get you guys some of these. Let's see. Now we're getting back into the Texans. Falcons fans can leave. Yeah, TJ Yates is the quarterback's coach. I love TJ. Penix is great. It's sad he won't play for a while. Yeah, all the Kamari Lassiter talk about is 40, but let's not forget people like Richard Sherman run a similar 40. Yeah, and I don't, I think Chef with the Halal Rooks, I think that the 40 times stuff, the more and more this year, it seems like now that there's all the GPS data and everything else, I think that people are not as high on the 40, even in the evaluation of it. And a lot of teams haven't been for a long time. It's funny though, because they'll bring it up when a guy runs a fast 40, and then they'll discount it when a guy runs a slow 40. We're like, 40s don't matter. Jerry Rice ran a 4.6. But then I want to say I caught Nick citing somebody's 40 time. Was it Bullock? I don't know. So it's not like they never bring it up, but it's something. Haters have Penix envy. You know what it's like, Penix envy? You know what it's like with the 40 time? It's a little bit like IQ, or SAT scores or anything else. You know that it's flawed in terms of predicting how an individual will do. And yet, when you find out somebody has a really high one or a really low one, you're kind of like, I don't know if I want to breed with this person or not. Okay, Green Bay drafted Jordan Love whenever Aaron Rodgers was only there with 2 years left in his contract before the Aaron Rodgers trade. Michael Penix drafted 4 years before Kirk Cousins' own contract is over. I don't know if that's agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. My favorite player from this year's draft class is probably Cade Stover. No, let me think. Boy, I like Bullock and the upside of Bullock. I'm going to go with Cade Stover. Just because where you got him in the draft too with his potential upside. And I'm going to be honest with you. Some of it is probably skewed by memories of Owen Daniels. Talk about a guy that went in the 4th round into a Kubiak style offense, in that it was Kubiak's offense himself, and did very well for himself. But I think Cade Stover, we'd have to look at the measurables. You know what? Let's go ahead and do this. Let's look at the mock draftable for Cade Stover. And let's see it. Let's look at Owen Daniels on the mock draftable thing. It seems like Cade Stover is more athletic than Owen Daniels, but I don't know. Oh, good. Owen's not too old to have a mock draftable. So for those of you who don't know about these little spider charts, I love the spider chart. But Owen Daniels drafted in 2006 in the 4th round, ended up like being super, super, super productive, despite not being like, you know, an Aaron Hernandez style of where are we? Okay. Owen Daniels. So there's Owen Daniels. 20-yard shuttle. Look at that, Owen. Not a lot of explosiveness. So he had a 20-yard shuttle that was in the 95th percentile, 78th percentile on the 40-yard dash, vertical jump 67, broad jump 43, bench press 75th percentile. So if we go to Joel Dreesen was a comparable for him. So if we go to Cade Stover, wingspan. Ooh, he's got short arms. Okay, so now I get nervous with the blocking with the short arms. But 10-yard split on the 40-yard dash, 40-yard dash, 78th percentile, vertical broad jump. You know, not an incredible athlete whatsoever. An abysmal 20-yard shuttle compared to Owen Daniels. I'm gonna have to, you know what? I'm gonna text Owen Daniels and apologize to him for comparing him athletically to Cade Stover, because in some respects, but maybe on film, again, this is where the GPS tracking comes in. But behind him, I would say Bullock. Lassiter, I'm a little bit nervous about how handsy he was in college, and we'll get to that a little bit later. This is Rick Spielman, former NFL GM, and he gave out his AFC South draft grades. Found this intriguing here. A couple here that a couple players he likes that I like, a couple players that he dislikes that I like, and vice versa, and all of that. So here we go.
Yeah, excuse me. I don't know why you're going.
What was he's talking about here? Let me hold on one second. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. I had to be sure I figured out where he was coming in on this. Guys, so far we haven't had a single muted moment, right? Okay, I think this is where he's talking about J.C. Latham, the offensive tackle. The co-host here had said that he didn't think that J.C. Latham was athletic enough to be a left tackle.
Question Bill Callahan.
And he's saying, why would you question Bill Callahan, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league?
That's true. Who's probably the best offensive line coach maybe in the history of the NFL, about saying that J.C. Latham can go over and play the left side, but that's your opinion. But we all, you know, the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. We all can improve.
How lovely.
Okay, so as far as J.C. Latham goes, I do think that, again, when it comes to the athletic part of things, there's a lot of boy, he goes right into it. There's a lot about the Titans draft that doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. We're going to get to Mel Kiper talking about T'Vondre Sweat. I apologize. The T'Vondre Sweat pick I thought was just way too high. As far as J.C. Latham goes, though, I don't think the athleticism is necessarily an issue. It's a matter of like, okay, is he comfortable playing left tackle if he hasn't done it before? And it's not always so simple that you can just transfer over to that. We've seen that plenty of times with various players that they're good on the right, but not on the left, and vice versa. Mel Kiper will get to the part about the T'Vondre Sweat. Oh, son of a bitch. See what happened? I jinxed myself.
Opinion, but we all, you know, the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. We all can improve.
How lovely.
I liked what Chris Ballard did. I mean, he's going to be another one of these GMs that don't care what anyone thinks. If I have to see a player up there, Latu, he had him as the number one edge rusher because he had his option of going either with Verse or with Dallas Turner, but they felt Latu was the best edge rusher, so that's what he's going to do. And I thought they got a steal with A.D. Mitchell. I think he's still raw as a route runner, but his athleticism, his size, his ability to go downfield, we saw that in some of the clips. I think he's got it. And boy, was he mad.
Yeah, he was talking about how Chris Ballard was mad about all of the pre-draft smoke about Adonai Mitchell. Sean Pendergast made a really good point, which is I know that Chris Ballard was mad about all that pre-draft smoke about Adonai Mitchell, but Adonai Mitchell did drop to where he did in the draft. So whether the smoke, I'm less and less convinced these days that anything that's floated out there publicly is something that teams don't already know about. And that I don't know whether it's other people with an agenda or whatever it might be. I think other teams probably had valid concerns. That those quotes that leak out are scouts from other places, and a lot of times that smoke, sometimes it's bogus. Some of the stuff said about CJ was obviously bogus, but in this instance, he did slide to where he did slide. As far as Leatu, the defensive end that they drafted, this is going to be a really interesting one because I like Leitu's polish a lot. I love the kid. The kid had a neck injury, was out of football for 2 years because the doctors wouldn't clear him at Washington, and goes to UCLA and ends up being just one of the most polished college pass rushers I've ever seen. He is just silky smooth, sets guys up, just sometimes runs right by them like they're nothing. But it comes with a high degree of finesse and very little physicality. And that's what you worry about. He's got this neck issue, and you can see when he goes to tackle, he's always trying to be perfectly upright and not get his head into it at all. His rugby background actually helped him there, because in rugby you got to be a lot smarter about the way you tackle people. You can't duck your head in there, but it sticks out pretty clearly that he does not necessarily want to be in a pile or get into big contact. In the run game, he does well at times, just holding, rocking guys back and shedding and making tackles. But as a pass rusher, his speed to power really just is not impressive at all, especially like when he went against the kid from Oregon State, the offensive lineman there, the offensive tackle. He really got stonewalled. There's other times when he slants down inside where he gets stuck right on the line. There's no penetration whatsoever if there's any kind of resistance. So it's really a matter of like, okay, how far does that polish carry him in the NFL? And he might end up being really, really good. I just don't know if he has the athleticism to rely on nothing but finesse without balancing it out with power in some way. Maybe he develops that somewhere along the way. But like the kid did not want to quit on his dream of playing football. And while he was injured, he sat and worked with the defensive coaches on his arsenal of pass rush moves. He developed a Euro step by watching James Harden. I don't know if that's a plus or a minus, but it's very much a boomer bust scenario, I think, with Latu. He could end up being an all-time great, but I could also see him kind of fizzling out. It'd be interesting to see. Probably good for him playing up on that turf up there.
They needed to get speed at the receiver position because they got to get weapons for Trevor Lawrence. And when they lost Calvin Ridley to Tennessee, they needed to get the best receiver that could take top off coverage. And to me, that was Brian Thomas Jr. Mason, as you like to say, I call him Mason Smith, who's
it's the double A.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Arik Armstead, who they signed from San Francisco when he got released. Big, long, physical, has a lot of upside. I think he still can develop as a pass rusher. He can play against the run. We saw him work out down at LSU's Pro Day. This guy can bend for a big guy.
Okay, so
the Houston Texans.
We'll get to the Texans in a second. As far as Brian Thomas, yeah, I think I think his upside is going to be higher than Calvin Ridley's. I feel like Calvin Ridley we've seen enough of now through his promising start to his career, the year out for various reasons, and then last year where it really wasn't clear sometimes whether it was that Calvin Ridley wasn't on the same page as Trevor Lawrence, or if Trevor Lawrence wasn't just necessarily executing the offense properly. I think Brian Thomas Jr. has just incredible upside in this offense with a quarterback who layers the ball really well. Like when you watch him in person, I I was grudgingly very impressed the first time I saw Trevor Lawrence play in person, because there are some throws he makes that are pretty damn elite. And I know he hasn't developed the way people expected him to as of yet. But when you put a guy like Thomas out there who can catch 50-50 balls, who's got a huge catch radius, like, it's very easy to envision, say, Derek Stingley covering him, having him blanketed, and Thomas still getting a reception. So that's a concern within the division. As far as the second guy, Mason Smith, that he was talking about, the defensive tackle, I compared him to Eric Armstead when we were talking about him before the draft, because athletically, he's not like a super explosive guy or anything, but very tall, very long, and has an ability to use his hands well. So far, like last year when he was coming off an ACL, he didn't look as strong as Eric Armstead. He didn't look like that type of just a beat you over the head with a lead pipe type of dude, but he was coming off an ACL. So I think they see a lot of upside there. The first thing I thought of with those two next to each other was Marcus Stroud and John Henderson. Now those guys, like Stroud was, it might be similar. Stroud was 6'5", and I think Henderson was 6'7". I know Mason Smith is 6'5", and I want to say Eric Armstead is at least 6'6" or 6'7". It's hard. It's hard for quarterbacks when you got two tall defensive tackles like that. It kind of takes away all of these throwing lanes over the middle if they're adept at getting their hands on balls. So a concern for CJ with those two guys in the middle that he'll have to deal with this year. It'll be interesting to see how he handles it.
And just gorge themselves into free agency. Trade for Stephon Diggs, go and sign Danielle Hunter, trading for Joe Mixon. So they went out there and spent most of their time trying to get that done. So now what they do, it's like, Joe, when you go to a meal and you're trying to fill in the cracks. So that's either with bread or salad. Okay. So this was a bread or salad type draft for me.
Yeah. I like the analogy. I think that if you look at Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Danielle Hunter, certainly. Danielle Hunter and Stephon Diggs would be like the main course or the dessert or something. Joe Mixon would be like a healthy appetizer. And the bread, the salad, all the other stuff to fill in the holes in the dinner. That's what the Texans did in the draft. I think that the biggest complaint, or I guess the biggest concern I'd have about the draft, and we'll never know this, but is, did Nick Caserio underestimate how hard it was going to be to trade back up into the first round? Because a lot of these late round picks were devalued this year because so few underclassmen declared for the draft. So a lot of the guys that would have been better prospects than some of the guys who were there, they just decided, okay, I'm going to take this NIL money because I've got a 5th round projection. I've got a 6th round projection. I can go make $200,000 in NIL money and it's guaranteed. Or I can just take my chances and perhaps get drafted, get cut, or get drafted to a team that just throws me in at the end and there's too much competition. Like, it's makes a lot of sense for those guys to go back and try to improve their stock for next year. But I mean, Nick himself said they were trying to trade up and it didn't work out, obviously, when they were trying to trade up to get into the first round, or trade up in the second round when 4 defensive tackles went in 5 picks. 2 cornerbacks went just ahead of the Texans. And I think the price was just too high for what Nick wanted to pay. Now, is that something he anticipated and was just cool with it because he was playing it cool, or did it catch them by surprise? I don't know. Oh, okay, here we go. Kamari Lassiter. So Kamari Lassiter, 2nd round pick taken by the Texans. I'm getting more and more excited about it. I've got a couple concerns, and we'll watch a breakdown from a guy I found on the internet because I thought he had some good clips and had some good stuff. But here's DeMeco on Kamari Lassiter.
They got some very good football players. And one kid that I really like is Calen Bullock. He reminds me a little bit of, let me throw it back here, Reggie Nelson, except he doesn't tackle as well as Reggie Nelson did. But he came out of Florida. He was like a deep middle safety. This kid has a lot of range and ball instincts.
That was not DeMeco Ryans, but I'm done talking about the he likes Bullock. Okay, so here we go with DeMeco Ryans on Kamari Lassiter.
I thought it was a very solid draft, but it was more filling in the cracks than the meaty part. They ate the meat in the main course during free agency.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, Kamari provides toughness. He provides, I mean, you talk about energy and the way he plays the game, like he loves football, and it shows on the tape. It jumps off the tape. He's a versatile player. He can play inside. He can play outside. But you talk about a guy who's a leader, a guy who works hard. He's everything that our team is about. We talk about everything being relentless and attacking the day with a relentless mindset every single day. That's what Kamari brings.
You know, when DeMeco puts it that way, you know, I've got these concerns about Lassiter and his handsiness in college, which you get away with being more handsy in college and being and riding guys down the field. But I think that does go into it. Like, he's going to compete. He's going to go out there. He'll try to bully you if he can. He's got a very good anticipation for routes. Sometimes one of the comments I said I saw about him was that sometimes he runs the route better than the receiver himself. He's got a very good sense for when the receiver is going to go up for the ball, turning and looking for the ball, all those kinds of things that sometimes are infuriatingly absent from some cornerbacks. He has that. So it's really just refinement in some respects. And, you know, like any other cornerback, where I don't know if his 40 time obviously isn't a huge deal. I think the bigger concern that teams might have, whether they're talking about 40 time or not, is like, all right, there's times there where if you get beat, you're using your hands and grabbing. Is it because he doesn't trust his feet? Does he not have the ability to catch up? There's plenty of examples him running like in perfect relationship on a 9 route down the sideline, just in the hip pocket of the receiver. So like, he's got game speed, but there's just a couple little things to be concerned about. This is but here's the good stuff. This is let me catch this guy's name. And I did put him in the link below. SG Scouts. This guy's got like 1,800 subscribers on YouTube. But I liked this video of Kamari Lassiter. So go ahead and follow him if you like this.
Amongst cornerbacks, big improvement from his 65.7 grade in his sophomore season, which had him at number 96 in the nation. 37.5% of his targets ended in receptions, tied 4th. 40.7 snaps per reception in man coverage, 7th, and he also had a 39.6 passer rating allowed. 0 touchdowns on 394 coverage snaps. Physical competitor, Kamari is a tough football player who...
Let me look at those real quick. I don't care about the PFF. You son of a... Okay, I don't necessarily care about the PFF grade as far as a ranking goes. The grades are good for some things, but not for ranking players. 37.5% target to interception ratio, right? And that's with, I mean, he had a target to reception ratio, 40.7 snaps per reception. That was 7th. And some of the other metrics were even, you know, top 2 or 3.
Pass rating allowed. 0 touchdowns on 394 coverage snaps. Physical competitor, Kamari is a tough football player who likes to play physical. This is one of the big differences when comparing his sophomore film to his junior season. He uses his hands more now. 3rd and 10 here versus Florida. Lassiter,
and he means that in a good way, I think.
Is pressed up against a big target. He doesn't back down. Footwork is smooth. Doesn't open up too early. Gets his hands on the shoulder. Good place.
And this is a good example too, right here, of just face guarding but not drawing a penalty and seeing exactly when the ball's coming.
Strength to slow down the receiver. Plays through the ball.
Oh, he wasn't face guarding on this one. That was a different one I was thinking of. Okay, he just turned and got the ball.
Way to disrupt this pass. Textbook stuff in a big moment. Lined up in man coverage again. Soft press look, and he has help from the safety.
That's up top if you can't see.
The inside. He uses leverage. I like his anticipation and reactive quickness at the top of the route. Receiver tries to push off, but Kamari is strong and balanced and also has the speed to cover this across the field. Off the bat, you can see
there. I mean, he's got outside leverage, but he's on him the entire time.
That he has NFL level size and speed. 3rd down 1v1 fade, this time versus another talented prospect in Xavier Legette. Similar coverage as the last play. You'll see here that Xavier doesn't have the lateral movement to test a guy like Kamari. Legette fakes the inside release.
Why aren't you letting me catch the football?
And then tries to bully Lassiter back outside. But the corner stays disciplined and has the strength to...
You see, I mean, these guys just ride each other down the field.
Fight with big Legette. A few plays.
Like there at the end there too. Like he was running with Legette, and he was. I mean, like at the end, he had a nice subtle grab there too.
Before we have a similar matchup This time tight to the formation. Leggett tries to duck his shoulder and explode up the field, but it doesn't work as Lassiter reacts quickly with his feet and gets his hands on him. He holds him a bit down the field, but does well to keep it subtle. If you're going to play physical as a corner, you got to get handsy sometimes, but just don't be egregious with it. And Kamari does a good job of that, especially going up against a receiver like this. There's going to be a lot of tussling and grabbing.
And I think that's a good Xavier Leggett's a big dude who's having a hell of a year.
And the aggressiveness translates to tackling as well. His 79.9 tackling grade ranked in the top 40 for corners. Slot receiver motions over to the weak side, which hints to the
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. This was let me see if he points this out or not.
Defense that this is a screen. Lassiter flies off the snap and blows this play up.
The nice thing about this one that you can't catch in this clip is that he baited this somewhat by he saw it coming and stepped off the line into off coverage. I think just to really be sure that on the option that the quarterback chose the screen option.
This is the kind of thing you want to see from a defender. Vicious effort. Now.
Okay, good. I'm going to move past him because I didn't ask that guy for permission to use all his stuff. I don't want to just run through it for 5. Seems like a nice kid. But that's linked below. You can go ahead and follow that dude.
See him possibly sneak.
I have no problem stealing anything at all from ESPN or Fox or anything like that. But the individual guys, I like
into the first round. He's got late first talent.
Okay. Here we go. The big kahuna, the guy whose opinion is never wrong, Mel Kiper. Mel Kiper is the same as PFF. If he says something positive about your team, he's an expert. If he says something negative, clowns. But he's with Field Yates, and I am always curious to see what these guys. A lot of times, especially with Mel, I like that he knows the scuttlebutt, and I think he's from back in the day before so much of it was film based, but he's got all these relationships with people. So when he starts talking about how teams were saying this or teams were saying that, I tend to trust him.
Well, I liked a lot of I like the players they drafted.
So this is a moment where I'm saying that obviously Mel Kiper is a genius.
Kamari Lassiter, I had talked a lot about on this podcast. He's in the hip pocket of those receivers. He plays a physical brand of football. Yes, he didn't run 4.45. Who the hell cares? These 40 times drives me crazy, Field. A 4.5 is a bad 40 time now. It's how do you play? You can run a 4.5 and still play faster. You can run 4.4 and play like a 4.6 guy. Blake Fisher, had he been back at Notre Dame for another year, would have been a guy we were raving about.
Okay, so I mean that's always subjective. Okay, how would you feel about it? Lots of times guys come back for another year and they actually regress. So I do feel that about the 40 times way overblown in general. Although they'll bring it up if it's good, but way overblown, especially when it's 4.5. There's plenty of really good cornerbacks who run a 4.5 40, especially in this team where like they're not going to become. I don't think they're ever going to become a team that's all about press man or anything like that. So I think that it's. Because DeMeco wants a defense that's the engine is driven up front. And when you have a defense like that, you don't have to blitz. You don't have to play a boatload of man. And your guys on the back end can just come up and be physical. That's why he's got the kill zone. The whole concept of a kill zone is that, hey, you're going to be playing zone, but because you're playing zone, you're creating spots where based on your coverage and the routes that, yeah, there's going to be some receptions. But if you anticipate it and you come up and you got the right mindset, you're going to physically punish guys and you're going to knock the ball out and you're going to get interceptions and you're going to do great harm to ribs and internal organs. That's what he wants to do. It all starts with the guys up front. That's why that's the engine. When it comes to like Lassiter, it's really about his anticipation skills. I think his ability to read routes and play, match coverage, all of those things, more so than anything where you worry too much about his top end speed. Even if in the 40 time, again, it's obviously not the be all end all. It's the other stuff on the football field.
Bullock, I know Matt Miller, you talked about him a lot. I'm not as high on him, but in the third round, that's not bad. I love Cade Stover, former linebacker, defensive player at 265 pounds, ran a 4.65. Caught the ball, blocked. He's kind of a throwback type of player the Texan fans are going to love. And guess what? CJ Stroud's reunited with Cade Stover. I love that they did that. They didn't forget about one of CJ Stroud's key guys in Cade Stover. Then you go to later in the draft. I thought Jawar Jordan could be this year's Keaton Mitchell. I didn't think he'd run a 4.56. I thought he might run a 4.4.
See there. Oh, okay. He thought he might run a 4.4. Okay, isn't it? Okay.
He didn't, but he played.
Yeah. But that is again. I think there's just more. There's more stuff for scouts to have that backs them up now. When they say, okay, this guy has game speed versus testing speed. There's just more tools to be able to break down the film and measure the actual speed, whether they have GPS tracking or not. That for a late round pick, especially, I think that's the upside for him.
Fast at Louisville. He was a home run hitting back who could catch the ball out of the backfield. Then you get a Marcus Harris late. At one point in time, we were talking about Marcus Harris, maybe 3rd or 4th round.
I would have been surprised if, 3rd or 4th round. I like Marcus Harris. I did a video on him a couple days ago. He gets into the backfield. He just flat out gets into the backfield. He's undersized. He was 286 at the combine. I feel like I don't know. I'll have to see him in person. But his size hurt him at times in the SEC, but also against those same SEC offensive linemen. He had some really good reps, both in the run and in the pass, getting upfield, has a knack for getting into the backfield, can make himself skinny and do all that stuff. So for a late round pick, I think he's very, very intriguing.
I just thought they got some good football players, but I thought some of those guys early were a little underrated. Kamari Lassiter being one of those. And I really think that Cade Stover is going to be a key guy for CJ Stroud. So both sides of the ball, they got help for a team that is ready to roll, maybe into the Super Bowl. Who knows? So
the big thing about Cade Stover being able to play alongside Dalton Schultz is that look, we've seen just with some of what we saw during the season, but then especially with CJ Stroud's film breakdowns that he did after the season, so much of what Schultz was able to start doing was based on his ability to adjust to coverages and looks and be on the same page with CJ. Like that, Tank Dell and CJ are getting that relationship. And I think for Cade Stover, for a guy who isn't a blazing athlete or anything like that, all of that little nuanced stuff really, really matters. And he's going to be able to see that in action, hopefully pick it up sooner than faster. The relationship for whatever nonverbal communication and timing and everything CJ had with Cade Stover at Ohio State, theoretically that helps at least get a jump start on things.
I just loved how aggressive the 2024 NFL draft was for the Houston Texans. Obviously, shipping the 1st round pick last year during the 2023 NFL draft proved to be a masterstroke with CJ Stroud and also Will Anderson. But Nick Caserio is constantly wheeling and dealing, targeting players for a roster that might be, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th best in the entire AFC, especially with the expected growth of CJ Stroud going into his 2nd season.
I think the other thing, too, that I was remiss in not mentioning this more, look, we all know the Texans' schedule on paper right now looks a lot tougher than it was last year. We know that can change, obviously, but just by quarterbacks alone, it looks like it's going to be a tougher schedule. But the other side of it is that, man, the Texans had the most starter games missed due to injury of any team in the league last year. So that was a real thing that that obviously hampered them, especially when you start thinking about the fact that the offensive line had 4 backups playing for a good portion of the first part of the season. That should be better. The other part of it, aside from CJ actually getting better, is just the run game alone. And if that can be improved, if only just by Dameon Pierce not getting the lion's shares of the carry, like swapping out the running back. Remember the first half of the season last year, they were really trying to force it with Dameon Pierce. And that was part of the issue. The offensive line has to get better, obviously.
You and I saw T'Vondre Sweat a little bit different during the pre-draft process, but did you still think that 38 was a little bit rich for T'Vondre Sweat?
Yeah, I did. You had the off the field thing. You look at T'Vondre Sweat. I like the kid. I'd like them a lot better, more than anybody did. We had debated that. I thought he was a guy who was productive. I thought he was more disruptive than anybody gave him credit for. Byron Murphy II didn't outproduce him by much in terms of even sack production. He had 5. Sweat had with 2.5. Sweat was getting the job done. Why couldn't you run against Texas? It was because of that wall that was T'Vondre Sweat. He is huge. I understand the draft process didn't treat him tremendously well, but you go back to the tape, people say, well, he's built for 1980s. And
okay, so I'm one of those people that say he's built for 1980. I say he's built for 2002 even. The fullback and like regular sets or 21 sets really started to see the demise around late 2000 aughts or so. So whatever, whether it's 1980 or 2002, 2003, he's built for an earlier era.
Another one of those guys. I'll talk about Tommy Eichenberg, built for the 80s. We don't need the stay-at-home type defensive tackles anymore. Last time I checked, they still do run the football. And T'Vondre Sweat did give you some ability to get into the backfield.
No, he totally did. I really like the way T'Vondre Sweat played. The problem was that when he tuckers out, he becomes a liability in the outside zone. Like there were times this year where you could tell he was tired and he petered out. He'd be like almost within reach of running backs and he just couldn't run full speed. That's why his weight concerns me so much. That's why him thinking that playing at 365 is okay. It's probably okay as long as you just really never want to be anything more than a 2-down back. Where that becomes an issue is if you're going up against a team. This is why I'm curious about them drafting him in the second round. When you're playing teams that are very capable of just saying, okay, we're just going to spread it out. We'll be in 3 wide all day long and go ahead, keep him out here if you want. And we'll go up tempo and we'll see how much of a pass rusher he is. If he had showed the willingness and the discipline to keep his weight down, then it might be different. But that's the big issue for me.
So when you look at it and you size it all up, I thought at the end of the day, he'd be a 3rd-round pick like Gilbert Brown, who was my comp to him when he came out of Kansas a while ago, right?
So, okay. And that's the issue. Like Gilbert Brown was an awesome player. He was probably 365. But this is in the late 1990s when Green Bay played Denver in the Super Bowl. Gilbert Brown was just gassed at the end of it. Just trying to run side to side against an outside zone team. And that was back when teams were not spread out nearly as much and you could keep your base defense on the field a lot more. So it's really like I was all for it. Like even with the DUI, I thought that T'Vondre Sweat as like a late 3rd or 4th round pick or something, I think he might be too dominant to go late 3rd. It's just a matter of where they drafted him, I guess. And who you didn't take to draft him in the 2nd round. I just feel there's more impact players available in the 2nd round, but I'm going to be interested to see and watch, especially for a team like the Texans that had trouble running the ball at times last year. If T'Vondre Sweat is a monster and he does keep his weight under control and has endurance, then yeah, he'll be a headache.
And then when it came to Bird,
okay,
3rd or 4th best team in the NFC. You guys
going all the way back to there. Solomon Bird. I think I'm gonna have to do Solomon. I have to do Solomon tomorrow. I need to get going, everybody. Oh, and then I was doing the Steelers. I'll just probably wait just for fun right here. I saw somebody say that they didn't like Roman Wilson because he projects to be more of a number 3 wide receiver. Like, all right, well, I mean, yeah, if you're your slot and it's a 3rd round pick, that's fine. But not to mention, like the Steelers and the success they've had with receivers taken in the 2nd, 3rd round is kind of freakish over the years. Now, a lot of these guys, you have to factor in Ben Roethlisberger for it as well. But they've done a really good job. Chase Claypool is in there. Let me see. Let me get out of here. I put too many clips in here today. I didn't plan that there was going to be this much stuff here. I got to get running. I was only supposed to do an hour. Appreciate all of you who stick around until the very end of these really long episodes. I'm internally flattered that you guys do it. So I really appreciate it. If you don't know who I am, I'm Seth Payne. Played for the Texans for 5 years, the first 5 years. Played in the NFL for 10 years. I do Sports Radio 610. We'll have Nick Caserio on tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Nick Caserio on tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. And the name of that YouTuber that was doing the film breakdown, it's down in the comments. I think it's SG Sports or something, but that's down in the comments. You can link it there. Thanks, everybody.